lasting change. So when I went to grad school, the reason I went ahead and got my dissertation was that because I started going there because the classes were so good and I was learning so much. I went ahead and did the doctoral program because I actually got to study the unconscious ways we keep ourselves from succeeding. And that was all about how we do and don't make change. And I was fascinated by people who would go away for a weekend and come back and say, oh, I've made this huge change. I'm going to be different. And things wouldn't change. Or there are a lot of doctors that'll use the example of people have a heart attack and you check in with them 6 months later and they haven't changed really anything about the way that they were acting that led to a heart attack. So change does not come in these big sweeps, nor does lasting change. You might think it does right after an event or in one of those inflection points, but you have to actually continue to do it and to bring awareness to it to keep that as and allow it to carve the groove that becomes a neural pathway. So we used to think actually the brain didn't change. We were, stuck with what we got. Turns out it's not true. And part of lasting change is changing the neural pathways. And a lot of that is understanding the unconscious. Because when we understand why we are doing something, we can then set an intention, experiment till we find the way to make the change, and then support that change. But if we just knowing, not quite enough, at least not for me. Sometimes when you know something, you will change it. But in my world, you're going to get there a lot faster if you set an intention. And if you make that intention reasonable. The difference between I want to understand my financial situation and I want to fix all my financial woes. I want to start to be involved in taking action for a civic problem I believe in versus I'm going to solve that civic problem. So there are smaller pieces. So that's what we're breaking down. And for the lasting change, you're going to set the intention, make the changes. Once you've actually made the change, it's solidified, you have the neural pathways, and then you want to check in on it later. So there's a little more about that, actually a lot more about that in the other talk. But with stress and worry and anxiety, what I would say is that this is a harder time to make change. It is. It just is. There is so much out of your locus of control and influence that you have to deal with. So when you pick something to change, pick something you can be successful with and that has impact. So if it doesn't matter so much if you change it, don't spend time on that. Pick something that is going to be helpful to you or something that if you don't change, it will cause you serious problems. So even when I'm coaching leaders, I look at what are their strengths and how do we grow them and what are fatal flaws. Not what are all the negatives they do, because they're not going to fix all those. You hire for that. But a fatal flaw, yeah, that one you might have to work on. So for me, lasting change, it has to have the unconscious component, understood. And then it has to have some repetition for you to build new neural pathways. And then it has to have some later kind of check-in, because sometimes you need to come back and do the intention again. And it takes a few rounds of that before it's really laid down, especially if it's something you've been doing for a really long time.